Throughout the years, we've seen many biopics gracing the cinema. Some of them tell a nearly accurate story, while many others tend to exaggerate the events of the figure's life. And in the case of the recently released Blonde about Marilyn Monroe's life, it's far worse. For today's episode, we'll be talking about why Blonde is the Passion of the Christ for Marilyn Monroe. So if you want to know why, keep watching for more. Based on what we've seen, Monroe was a victim, and the movie Blonde is pleased to victimize her time and time again. It would have been a cinematic disaster even if Andrew Dominik's Blonde, which he wrote and directed, had provided a sympathetic and insightful depiction of Marilyn Monroe's private life. The story of Monroe is told in the film in an outrageously vulgar manner, as if it were being channeled through Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. The character is subjected to a grueling series of relentless torments that, rather than inspiring fear and pity, reveal a unique form of sadistic direction. Blonde wallows in the protagonist's hardships to bemoan them. By making Monroe become the director's own plaything, it shows Monroe as the object of her era, environment, and fate. Dominik mimics the manipulation of Monroe's personality and artistic ability by Hollywood studio officials and artists to tell the tale of how they did it. The central theme of Joyce Carol Oates' adaptation Blonde is that Marilyn Monroe was a victim all her life. Lily Fisher's character, Norma Jean Mortensen, the child, is the victim of her mentally ill mother, Julian Nicholson, her uncaring father, and some neighbors who give her up for adoption. She is a young woman who is the target of photographers who capture her in the bare form. Ana de Armas portrays Marilyn Monroe. She suffers at the hands of studio head Mr. Zay, or David Warshawski, who rapes her before giving her roles. He becomes an agent who shapes her persona and forces her to fit it. To make things worse, producers and directors underpay her and stereotype her as sexy. Plus, two lovers take advantage of her and abuse her trust. During her years of popularity, she suffers at the hands of her two husbands, Arthur Miller, or Adrian Brody, who turns her into a vampire for his writing, and Joan DiMaggio, Bobby Cannavale, who wants her to stop working and is ferociously jealous and physically abusive. President John F. Kennedy, or Caspar Philipson, assaults her, and the Secret Service also mistreats her on his behalf. DiMaggio and Kennedy are clearly identified in the film by their characteristics and their involvement in Monroe's life, even though the names are not used. Not only do the paparazzi and the media intrude on her private life, but her ardent followers are slobbering perverts who demand her televised sensuality and her public displays of gratitude. Even though she views it as a pure product for public consumption and has little to do with her true personality, many mistakes her Marilyn Monroe character for who she really is. The movie's most memorable scene features her remarking, "She is pretty, but she isn't me," as she examines a magazine portrait of herself as Marilyn Monroe. However, the movie never even comes close to indicating who, in fact, the real person is. The film portrays Marilyn as an exhilaratingly gifted performer who, long before her time with the Actors Studio, delves deeply into emotional memory and personal experience to produce performances of startling intensity. Additionally, it shows how little room Hollywood provides for that artistry and how it forces her into parts that emphasize her attraction. She's portrayed as a well-read, perceptive, and wise actor whose artistic objective and dream remain in the theater. And she explains why in the best sequence in the film. She tells DiMaggio on their first date that she wants to move from Hollywood to New York to study acting, become a better actor, and perform in theater, especially in Chekhov, because acting in movies is cut. It's true that acting in movies and on stage are very different, and those who are brilliant at one aren't necessarily well-suited to the other. She also adds, it's a jigsaw puzzle, but you're not the one to put the pieces together. But the movie Blonde just winks and hints at what Marilyn might have accomplished on stage rather than actually showing the difference. Movies could be cut, and Dominik gives the character of Marilyn some particularly cruel ones. In Marilyn's first acting class at the Actors Studio, Miller puts her on stage to read the lead role in a play while he watches skeptically, doubting of the Hollywood diva's ability to perform the challenging role to his satisfaction. This ought to have been a prime example of dramatic bravura, but he leaves it out. Instead, she draws thunderous cheers from her peers as well as astonished adoration and emotional sobs from Miller. The performance itself, though, it's not even seen for a second. There's nothing about the politics of the real-life Monroe, including her defiance of the press and the studio to wed Miller, who, by the way, was compelled to appear before the House Un-American Activities Committee about his prior affiliations to the Communist Party. Moreover, you won't see Monroe's conversion to Judaism and her strong displeasure against nuclear weapons. Nothing is said about the control control Monroe gained over her career by starting a production business, so she could select and work on the projects she wanted. Nothing is said about her early love of movies and how she became to discover modeling. To make matters worse, the film cuts quickly from the little Norma Jean's arrival at the orphanage to a montage of the teens magazine images. There is no mention of Monroe's struggles to escape poverty and hardship, her serious and intelligent efforts to advance her profession, nor her compulsive dependence on Natasha Lytess for 7 or 8 years as her acting instructor. In other words, anything related to Monroe's commitment to her art and her business is confined to the tiniest of margins. And it gets worse still since Blonde minimizes the instances in which Marilyn conveys shrewd ideas and perceptive thoughts to an indicative forensic minimum, even though the film does insist via a few scenes that the character is the clever and perceptive performer. For instance, Marilyn claims that their relationship is not on the way to her disastrous visit to JFK and hotel room, and yet there was nothing from their interaction before the scene in which he attacks her. Dominik is uninterested whether she had a social life separate from her interactions with men, whether they were Kennedy, DiMaggio, Miller, or a couple of boyfriends, Charlie Chaplin Jr. or Xavier Samuel, and Edward G. Robinson Jr. or Evan Williams, who she is known within a threesome. Dominik's actions, as much as what he does, are the issue. He gives the impression that he defines poetry as employing 10 ambiguous words when 3 concise ones would do, and he then applies that misunderstanding to visuals. He uses out-of-focus images, but not to the point where they are truly obscure, a soundtrack that particularly envelopes voices in aquatic murk, slow-motion scenes to highlight emotions without developing them, and a color and black and white color palette to approximate a sense of subjectivity of Marilyn's state of mind. But in comparison to Dominik's more ostentatious and showy techniques, such sloppy approximations are nothing. One of the most childish effects I've ever seen is used when Marilyn becomes pregnant. She spends the evening outside with the 2 juniors while discussing astrology and gazing up at a sky filled with stars that start to move before changing into squirming sperm. Her fetus is then depicted in the womb, and it reappears in the film on numerous occasions in CGI fetus antics that ultimately result in it communicating to her. To play a role in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Marilyn had an abortion. This is traumatic, as are a subsequent miscarriage and another obliquely hinted abortion. The attempts at subjectivity and poignancy are made in all of these instances in a crude and insensitive manner. Viewing the abortionist from the perspective of Marilyn's vagina, looking upward and out, symbolizes Dominik's own abuse of the character's body. De Armas's energetic and nuanced performance alone gives the movie some dignity amid such grotesquerie and depravity. Then, there's the fact that the film's other similar effects and gimmicks degrade its purported significance and make the awful anguish laughable. For example, the TV in Kennedy's room plays a clip of a rocket taking off and scenes that appear to be culled from Earth versus the Flying Saucers, in which alien spaceships explode against the Washington Monument and the Capitol. The culmination of Marilyn's lifetime search for her father is the moment of her death, when the image of the man her mother called her father is projected into the sky. You've got to credit it to Dominik. He not only outdoes the apparently vulgar showman of old Hollywood in overt artistic ambition, but also in cheap sentiment, flagrant tastelessness, and exploitation. In the end, Blonde is a complex and perhaps imperfect portrayal of a lady who is adored and revered by so many people. And it seems to take away some of the positive femininity from a pioneer in releasing women from antiquated cultural standards. It makes complete sense why the performance has received accolades but not the film. And on that note, we're ending today's video about the movie Blonde. Have you watched the film yet? If you have, let us know what you think about it in the comment section below. Before you go, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel with the notification bell on for more videos like these. See you next time, and thanks for watching.